Slurpy dirt, my G's. Hope you're all doing well. Today I've got a vital bass for you guys because I started off this morning trying to make a phase plant couple of basses, and I made two alright ones, but they just weren't really hitting my nan's sweet spot, so to speak. So I thought, I'm going to go to the gym. Went to the gym, realised I lost my wallet, actually found it at the gym, so that was very, very lucky. And then what happened next was I was a bit more invigorated, energized, something like that. I came home and I thought, let's try again. But this time I'm going to make it easier for myself. So what I did was I chose a different synth. Basically, I chose Vital. Do you remember Vital? Do you remember that one? Can you remember Vital? Is that something you remember from the past, from history? I felt like I was 9 years old again, playing Road to World Cup, FIFA 98. Actually, I would have been 7 or so. Yeah, I felt like I was 7 years old again, playing FIFA Road to World Cup 98, and just getting absolutely slammed by Argentina versus England, like 8-1 or something, on like a difficult setting. So I thought, what I could do is turn the referee strictness down on the setting so I can foul all of the other players and injure them all, and basically injure them all off the pitch. And then they won't be able to, once their substitutions run out, they'll have like 3 players left, and I can just sort of run rings around them and score like loads more goals. And that's what I thought I would do this morning with Vital. I thought I'd go back to an easier version of synthesis that I know I can make some alright sounds with. Hope you like this ridiculous intro today. Anyway, let's get into today's video, and I'm going to walk you through step by step a really, really cool neurofunk kind of bass sound, which you can use like just the free version of Vital. Don't need any extra samples or anything. You can follow along, make it. It's really easy, but also sounds good. And then afterwards, I'm going to show you why I love to chop out bounce out the sound to audio and then chop out the files and rearrange them to create like an even better like bass line arrangement. So let's get into it. Alright then, my G, so I'll just play you the loop first, and this is like the kind of better one where I've rearranged the audio file, so have a little listen. And I'm just building on top of the drums I made yesterday in Phase Plant, so you can check out that video if you want. I'm going to be doing like Phase Plant and Vital tutorials, kind of just depending on like my mood at the time. But like Phase Plant still like mainly because I think it's got more like, basically I'll create better sounds with it. It just takes a bit longer. Anyway, so here's the Vital bass I've made today. So this is like the original groove, like without the kind of rearranging. Which is cool, but it's not quite as energetic as when I chop it up. But anyway, let's talk about the sound design first, and yeah, jump into the voicing. So what we're going to use, I'm just going to use a saw wave, 2 sine waves, and a little bit of noise that's already in Vital. And then we're going to do 2 filters. One is going to be like a bandpass filter, which is going to be like shaping the main part of the sound. Then we're going to do a little bit of a phaser filter, which is going to just accentuate the mid-range kind of growly aspect of the sound. And with the modulation, it's just 1 LFO, which is a saw down. And this is going to be doing like the whole movement. And then we're going to use a bit of sort of phase modulation by adding in a secondary LFO to control the starting position of the first one, and this is going to give us like an extra level of funk. But let's get into starting off with just a saw wave here. So I've just set the unison on 3 and the percentage is still at 20. Make sure you turn the phase randomization down as well. I should do it on this one here as well. Yep. Next up, we're going to add in a sine wave at -12. So we got those saw wave harmonics like to fill out all the kind of mid-range and high end, and then we got our bassiness like from the sine wave, of course. And now we're going to add in another sine wave, which is an octave lower, and this is like more our sub bass. So yeah, quite a lot going on already. And next up, just for like an organic edge, the river texture. And what we're going to do already is we're going to bandpass all of this chaotic noise straight away. So here is the bandpass filter. And basically, I've left the oscillator 3 off, like not going through the filter, because this is the sub bass. So if you pay close attention, if I put it in, I don't have that sub underneath. So essentially what this bass is doing is it has a powerful sub bass like that's consistently there all the time. And the main sort of mid-range elements, you know, that sine wave that's an octave up and the saw wave, these guys are the ones that are being bandpassed. And so basically, if I was to switch off this little modulation here, what happens is we just have a normal ramp down. But if I put my LFO2, to the sort of starting position here, like I have, turn it all the way up, and then I can play around with the shape of LFO2. And when it starts to sort of go up here, it will affect the position of the first one and add in these extra funkier kind of, adjustments. Funky Adjustments. That's going to be the name of your first album, isn't it? Yeah. So yeah, that's like the way to get a little bit of a more random, cool kind of groove. And yeah, you just have to design the second LFO just completely randomly, like seeing what happens basically. You know, if I just... It's going to move the position of LFO1 around like in a different way every time. But this is quite a simple little groove here. So I'm quite happy with that. Anyway, back to the voicing. So like I said, there's also a secondary filter coming in from filter 1 as it's switched on here. And obviously the sub bass underneath is still like not going through any of these filters. And yeah, so phaser negative, just a bit of LFO as well. You know, the bandpass is on the LFO going all the way up. And this one's just going like a little bit, just to give a bit of attention to that mid-range area. And yeah, the last thing that I did to like really like amp up the excitement was to FM some of the sounds together. And so I've actually put them on a macro here, so you can see what happens when I put them all up. Okay, so a bit more interesting, bit more distorted and growly and nice and bassy. And yeah, we just FM the saw wave a little bit from oscillator 2, and then we also FM the low kind of sub bass from oscillator 2. And just because that was the combination that sounded good, right? Can see the FM from sample a little bit in here. I felt like the sample was feeling a bit left out, so I wanted to give him a little bit of a like 0.000000001% of modulation. There's a little bit of a boost in the volume on the sample here as well. And at that point, I think I've covered all of the main parts of the voicing. So let's move on to the effects, where we really can call up our grandmas and say, you know, we're really going to turn this bass into something absolutely special now. Glasses on, glasses off, glasses off, glasses on. Other way around. See you later. Effects. I'm starting off by adding in some reverb, because what I want to do is I want to like slam the reverb through some distortion and stuff, so we get this weird kind of energetic dynamic that happens from the reverb. But you have to use it in a small amount. I'm going to really take out a lot of the low end, sort of around almost 900 hertz here, and then it's mixed in sort of 4%. So you can hear there's a little bit of a tail on it. It's very subtle, but because we're over amplifying and distorting everything, that brings out the small details in sound, so that reverb will be amplified. Next up is a chorus. And I really like this one. And what I've done is I've modulated the mix, so it's on our LFO1, so it's going to start sort of off, or yeah. As the LFO is up the top and the chorus is mixed down to the left, to the mix sort of 0%, it's going to start off and then it's going to sort of come up as the LFO goes down. So it's kind of working in reverse. But essentially what the chorus is doing is it's also moving the voices on the LFO. So the delay in 1 and 2, you know, they correspond to the individual specific voices that the chorus is creating. And yeah, with the freeze mode on, you know, they're not moving randomly like a normal chorus. We're controlling the voices like I like to have control of them myself, and do them, yeah, get them moving in time with the LFO. And by choosing the depth very carefully, I find a little sweet spot where I feel like the depth just kind of like helps the chorus blend into the sound to give it an extra stereo image that just kind of fits with the original. And that's the idea of the chorus. So next up, I'll add in the compressor. And again here, it's mixed in on the LFO. So if I leave the mix up, it's really, really loud and aggressive because the attack is all the way up. So it's letting through the signal and it's really like boosting the volume. And what I'm doing is I'm using that overly distorted, boosted signal as the sort of starting point of the sound. So it's like a sort of transient almost. So yeah, that's why the mix is turned all the way down, and then we just modulate the mix on the LFO so we can get a little bit more of that compressed. I don't really see it as compression, you know, with this Vital one. It's kind of like an over distortion in a way, but I'm using it on the mix so that the first part of the sound is a little bit louder. So we're shaping it in the dynamics of the volume. So anyway, gives it a nice edge. Then we're going to use the distortion in quite a nice way here, because what we're going to do, it's even cool when the mix is all the way up, but basically I'm using it as a filter as well. So we've got the pre-filter mode switched on, and we're modulating the cutoff. So it's really like a kind of like a low pass filter on the sine fold mode. Nice bit of drive, and then we just mix that sort of back in. So when we mix it back, we retain some of that more like background sound, and it's a bit more sustained still, you know, because we don't chop out all of the high end. So yeah, just using it a little bit. But it gets a great sort of dynamic into the sound by having another sort of low pass filter here. And yeah, then we got a little bit of EQing. I just saw that there was a little bit of an imbalance and that the things were quite sort of high up and sharp here. So I just curved them down a bit. And then the high end, I boost it up quite nicely. And then finally, just one little filter at the end. And this is a phaser positive. And it's just mixed in on the LFO. And basically, again here, it just like draws a little bit of attention to that mid-rangey growl and gives us a little bit more of a dynamic twist. So that's basically the effects done. And there's one more little thing that I did, which was I added a little macro to the phase. And like I was mentioning earlier, with using LFO2 to modify the starting position of LFO1 to create these extra random, like funky adjustments in the groove, we can also change, you know, what's going on by not only the shape of the LFO2, but also by the speed of it, of course. So I've just tracked the speed to a macro here. And if I turn that up, just get a little bit of a faster kind of version of that sort of funky groove that I had. So they both sound pretty nice, but that faster one is a little bit more exciting. But anyway, what I've done after this is I've gone to balance it out. So let's have a little quick talk on, you know, how I bounced it and restructured like the bass line. So by bouncing out the whole audio file, just Control B, obviously on Logic, it's one good thing about Logic over Ableton, and I don't really want to get into this debate, but I just love how quick and easy it is to do that in Logic, and you have to sort of record and do other things in Ableton, but obviously it can still be done. But anyway, that has no relevance to this. Basically, once we got this file out, I can see clearly the sort of main stabs and hits and things like that. And I see this little part is one of the reasons I wanted to bounce it out, because it was a kind of, when I have that reverb first and then it goes through all of the distortion, it sort of like cuts down and cuts up in volume in a really sharp way sometimes. And it can often create this sort of clicking like effect. And this like little piece of sound here is like a little click. And so I heard that when I was like listening to the patch, and I was like, right, I'm going to delete that part when I bounce it out. So yeah, basically getting rid of that part, but I can see like my main sort of stab hits that I want to use. And so basically, yeah, I'm just sort of chopping them up. And I made two little channels just so I could like visualize a little bit of a call and response. So if you kind of listen to how I've done it here. So like it's very fast, and I'm using them sort of on really offbeat timings. So they're still like on these kind of like grid beats, but I'm doing them like in these like smaller like intervals. But these guys here, they give a bit of a repetitive rhythm. It's like dum 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 dum, just for a little bit of a moment. So it does kind of like make sense. And basically, if I was to extend these files so they kind of went up to the edge of the next one, I had this little quick extra stab already coming in, but I didn't really want that. I wanted it a bit more simple, although I liked the effect. So I thought what I'd do is I'd just use it once, because often when I produce things, I'll do like a little effect that only happens sort of once over the course of a loop. So you just get this like one moment that's a bit different. So that's something I do like in production in general, like all the time, in like over the course of a loop or something. I just have like one little moment where something's different. So that in this case, this second part here, we have this extra stab that comes in. Just to give the two sections a little bit of a different feeling. And yeah, the way it works with the drums is really cool. Because they're really like playing in the gaps between the kick and the snare, like all these sort of offbeat sort of shots. Like you see here, especially this guy here is sort of right in between the kick and the snare. So, like having them like right really in the middle between the kick and the snare, that's going to create like a really high energy like kind of motion, So it is a very like fast, choppy kind of groove here. But anyway, yeah, that's like a cool reason why like bouncing stuff to audio is like way more fun for me, because I can literally visualize everything, see where the drums are, and then place things around them, on a broader scale, and like trying to like do that all in the timing of the LFO in Vital, it would just be a bit painstaking, to be honest. So this is a bit of a more juicy, creative way to go about it, in my opinion. Anyway, thanks for watching the video. Really appreciate all your support on here. All of your comments are amazing. All of the guys on Patreon are my lifeline. Thank you so much for your support. And all of my students as well who book in regular sessions absolutely mean the world to me as well. I love teaching and talking about music, so please, let's keep going. Let's go. Have a great start to your week, guys, and much love.
Too great.